Welcome to the House of Truth. Today we're continuing our series on the Acts of Moses. And last time we talked about Balaam or Balaam as I've heard people pronounce his name. And Balaam and we saw Balaam was a real prophet of God. That the king of the Moabites wanted to hire to curse Israel. But he could not curse Israel because he was a real prophet of God, could only say what God said. And if he had spoken out of his own mind, he said, nothing would have happened anyways. He didn't cause people to be cursed. He only said what God said, and God backed up the cursing, the blessing of the cursing. But how Balaam, he'd been offered a position in ancient days called the Grand Vizier, which related to the word wizard. But it was like the king's right hand man, like his prime minister, perhaps in later times. A position similar to what Joseph had with Pharaoh, and with great wealth. But even with that, he could not. All he could do was bless Israel, and he also proceeded to tell Balaam. I'm sorry, Balak. What would happen to what would happen to Moab and some of the other and some of the other nations could fare with him for trying to bring a curse upon Israel like this? And then he left, but in the end he came back for the reward and told Balak what to do to get God himself to curse Israel and bring destruction on them. And so Balak sent a bunch of harlots to get Israel involved in worship of their version of the Baal of their area, Baal Peor. And that's where we're picking up today when we talk about the revenge on the Midianites, or the revenge on the Midian. Because we're going to begin here in chapter Numbers 25, verse 25, 5 through 9. And Moses said to the judges of Israel, slavery went every one of his men that were joined in the Baalpeor. And behold, one of the children of Israel came and brought into his brethren a Midianitish woman in the sight of Moses, in the sight of all the congregation of the children of Israel, who were weeping before the door of the tabernacle of the congregation. And when Phinehas, the son of Eleazar, the son of Aaron, the priest, saw it, he rose up from among the congregation and took a javelin in his hand. And he went after the man of Israel into the tent and thrust both of them through. The man of Israel, the woman, through her belly. So the plague was stayed from the children of Israel, and those that died in the plague were 24,000. Okay, so Moses is giving the instructions to the judges of Israel what to do. This God said to hang up their heads, cut their heads off, and hang them up before him to stay the plague. And as he's saying this, or he's no more done saying this, notice this man of Israel is brazenness. He brought unto his brother a Midianite. He brought one of these women with him to turn them into idolatry in their sight. And those they're all weeping before the door of the tabernacle of the congregation. They're waiting for the judgment of God that's coming upon them, this plague. And he is just in their face about it. Well, Moses had just given them the instructions to slay everyone of his men that are joined into Baalpeor, and they're all just standing there, letting and this guy's in their face, is going to go in his tent. Is going to go in his tent to commit sexual immorality with this woman, and they know it. But one man Phinehas, the son of Eleazar, who's now the high priest, he takes action. Just the Levites did before, and got the got at the into the golden calf, went around killing everyone everyone who was involved in that idolatry and fornication that came with that idolatry. He goes in there and kills them both, and thrusts through both of them, and the woman through her belly. Now, so the idea is they were already engaged in sex, and he went through the man's back, through the woman's belly, and into the ground, and killed them both. And that brought an end to the plague, because it was action, the end of the plague, not the crying, not the weeping. Save us, Lord, please have mercy on us, so on and so forth. It was the obedience to the instructions that God gave through Moses of this one man that ended the plague. So that, there's a lesson for us. Often people are out there crying to God, "Oh, have mercy." Why wasn't God stopping this? Because God's already given instructions, perhaps through his word, of what we need to do, and the chastisement for disobeying him will end when we get into obedience to him. And that's exactly what happened. It was action, not emotion, that brought an end to the plague and brought salvation. Now, as we continue on Numbers 25, verses 10 through 15, read the following. The Lord spoke unto Moses, saying, Phinehas, the son of Eleazar, the son of Aaron the priest, has turned my wrath away from the children of Israel, while I was zealous for my sake among them, and I consumed not the children of Israel in my jealousy. Therefore, behold, I give unto him my covenant of peace. He shall have it, his seed after him, even the covenant of an everlasting priesthood, because he was zealous for his God and made atonement for the children of Israel. Now, the name of the Israelite that was slain, even that was slain by the Midianite woman, with the Midianite woman, was Zimri, the son of Salu, a prince of the chief house among the Simeonites. And the name of the Midianite woman that was slain was Cozbi, the daughter of Zur. He was head over a people and a chief house in Midian. Okay, if you'll recall from our previous lesson, that when Balak went to go hire Balaam, he was in cahoots with the elders of the Midianites. They were involved too. As we saw last time, the Ammonites were also involved in some other groups, perhaps because they got the Midianites have this boundless fear that he has put in them. He's raised up fear to them inside them. For 40 years, for the most part of the 40 years they were wandering, they were in the land of Midian. Sinai's in the land of Midian. Not once they attack Midian, try to take it over, or cause any kind of trouble. But like we saw with the foundless accusations, when the Pharaoh who knew not Joseph rose up. The accusation that led to slavery was these people are going to rise up against you, and it was foundless. They had done nothing. They had done nothing for the Egyptians but good up to that point. And yet this accusation was there. The whole conspiracy accusation, the chronicles of the elders of Zion of its day, totally foundless accusation of, the Israelites, today people call them Jews, are just trying to take over everything. They had done no such thing. They were just trying to go live peacefully in their own land, but this accusation came. So they have sent not just their own daughters, but notice this woman over the chief of the house of Midian. This woman, it was like a princess, okay, And yet her father's using her. Her father, Zur, is using this woman, Cozbi, basically as a harlot, as a prostitute, or perhaps in sometimes in medieval times, they may use the word chattel when they came to when nobility would use their women, or sometimes even royalty in that regard. Sometimes they'd have the courtesans, which were basically prostitutes of the court, or, and perhaps in hopes of, of getting some guy hooked, some richer guy hooked on them or whatever, or to gain favor of that richer guy. But most of the goal, often the goal was to get him into a marriage, that had legal implications, so to make their position stronger. Or they may not go through all that. They would just marry her off to marry someone that she's never met, because the marriage will make their fortunes better. Well, that's kind of what's going on here with this Cozbi guy. He and notice they're both in this upper class. They're up there for the chief of the house of the Midianites. If this was a college campus, they would have been with one of the fraternity brothers and sorority sisters. Okay, and so this is perhaps playing into why most people were not, why they were in their face with this attitude. You know, you know, this rebellious attitude, this sense of privilege that they're above the rules, above it, and that nobody's going to do anything about it. And indeed, nobody did anything about it except for Eleazar, the son of Aaron, the priest. Because see, that's the way the world works. In the world system, often the more power you have, the more money, the more influence, the more you get away with, the less restrictions you have on you in that regard. While in the kingdom of God, it's exactly the opposite. The higher up you are in the kingdom, the more restrictions there are upon you. All the nations that are saved, as we saw, we looked at the tribulation of the kingdom, are going to be in the kingdom, and they are Gentiles and don't have the restrictions on that those who are part of the ethnic group of the Jews have. The point of all those laws of custom, like not eating unclean food and so and these holidays and the Sabbath and wearing clothes that aren't mixed fiber and so on and so forth, is to set them apart from the Gentiles, so they have more restrictions. The Gentiles can go out there and eat ham, but they can't. But they're higher up. The priest can't go to the funerals of their friends. Only their immediate family. But everyone else can do that. But they're higher up. They're higher up. They're higher up. They're higher up. They're higher up in the kingdom. Likewise, a king also has restrictions on him. The laws of the king will talk about that. When they didn't obey those commandments, it always led to trouble. But the high priest couldn't go to any funerals at all, not his own children, not his wife, not his parents, because he was holier to God, and there's a and death is from Satan, and being around death makes you unclean, because Satan is unclean. And so the more holy you are, and people are definitely different. God says it all the time, you're more holy. This one's more holy than that one, or whatever. The higher you are in holiness, the more restrictions there are on you. That's God's way. But that's not the way this Israelite's been operating. He's been operating the way of the world, and believed no one would stop him. No one, they weren't going to dare. Some of the lower class wouldn't dare raise up against him. People may absent even in the upper class wouldn't. because they don't want to get, they don't want to be, they don't want his father being angry at their house and whatever. And just a good old boy network, as people call it in the South, going on. I'll overlook your sin if you'll overlook mine. Okay. And he just believed nobody was going to do anything about it. And that's why he was so in their face about it. But Phinehas went with the ways of God and against the ways of the world. And therefore God has blessed him. He's given him a covenant of peace. What might be perceived as causing a problem with the world was going to brought him peace with God. And that peace was based on action. Because he acted in obedience to what God had said. Now we in Numbers 25, we wrap up here in verses 16 and 18 with what the Lord tells Moses to do about this. And the Lord said unto Moses, vex the Midianites and smite them, for they vex you with their wiles when they have beguiled you in the matter of Peor, in the matter of Cozbi, the daughter of the prince of Midian. Their sister was slain in the day of the plague for Peor's sake. Okay, so vex them, okay? Trouble them, do them as vex them, bring destruction upon them, is what he's saying. Because they sought to destroy them with their wiles. Even they were sending their women to do this, even the highest born, with this goal of destroying Israel. So now Moses given instructions to destroy them, to do them instead. God had said, those who bless Israel will be blessed, those who curse them will be cursed. We saw specifically Israel in our last lesson. And his instrument for cursing Midian in this particular case is going to be Israel itself. Now, this is a landmark event in the history of Israel laid out in the Bible. It's mentioned other places, looked back on, because it's significant. If you remember, before this new generation that had not that had been in the wilderness, that was below 20 years of age, or born after that, that was not 20 years and older, when they were sent to be wandering, had not rebelled against God, had batted 1,000, as they say. That's a baseball term, means they had no strikes, they had no missed swings. They've done everything perfectly up to this point. They dealt with the enemies of God. I mean, when they were attacked, they asked for God to help them, and He did. They recovered all the people, destroyed all these Canaanites. They followed in obedience and followed the Malach Adonai, the angel of the Lord, as judgment was brought on the Amorites, and they killed all of them without a loss of a single man. Except for the one village that was allowed to escape, where some were allowed to. They were displaced. They fled instead into their country, and I explained why in my previous lesson why God allowed that one city like that. But they had 100% obedience, 100% success until this point. Now, just as the previous generation had done with the golden calf, so they have done. They have done. And this is what Moses had to say on this in his big speech. Deuteronomy is just one big speech by him mostly. He's reminding him of this. And here's what we read down Deuteronomy 4, verse 3 through 8. Your eyes have seen what the Lord did because of Baalpeor. For the men that followed Baalpeor, the Lord has brought your God has destroyed them from among you. But you that did cleave in the Lord your God are alive, every one of you, this day. Lord, I've taught you statutes and judgments, even as the Lord my God commanded me that you should do so in the land whither you go to possess it. Keep therefore and do them, for this is your wisdom and your understanding in the sight of the nations, which shall hear of all these statutes and say, surely this great nation is a wise and understanding people. What nation is so great who has God so near unto them as the Lord our God does all these things we call upon him for? What nation is so great that has statutes and judgments of righteousness, this law which I set before you this day? Okay, so some of that law that God gave, of course, we've seen parts of it there were some more commandments added as we went along, like about the seats, when we talked about reminders of obedience. But the bulk of, but the majority of, but the core of them were given here in these ways. And now they have almost all of them. Moses is actually going to add a few. God's going to add a few more through Moses in his last speech, primarily concerning how the king is to conduct himself, and that will wrap up these commandments. But here's what. So he's telling them that this is going to bring him this. Now I want to draw to your attention this: the number that died in this plague is 24,000, and that's exactly how many died when God gave that law. The same number that died in the golden calf incident died at this incident of Baalpeor. A repeat, as it were. But this is fresh. And notice, in this case, all of them are alive this day, except for those men who died of that, those 24,000. All the rest are alive. Puts them in a similar position to where the previous generation was before they refused to go into the land and made a bad accusation against God at the report of the 10 scouts of the evil report. Okay, so so this is their wisdom and understanding. Now I want to draw your attention to this last part here, because I've heard people say we're not under the law. Someone's trying to put us under the law. So, and you look in your New Testament, your Brit Hadashah, you'll see that phrase only occurs twice. And one of them says, follow the leading of the Spirit, and you'll not be under the law. Well, according to Romans 8, if you follow your flesh, your flesh, the nature of flesh is not subject to God's laws, nor can it be. Romans 7 says the law is holy, its commandments are holy, just, and good, and your flesh cannot. It says, but the Spirit of God will give you the ability to do that. And if the Spirit of God's not in you, you're not of Christ. Paul says we have the mind of Christ. Well, if the Spirit of the law is never going to lead you contrary to it's going to lead you to do something contrary to the law. The Spirit of God is never going to lead you to do something contrary to the law of God. In fact, according to the writings of Paul, all Scripture was given by inspiration of the Holy Spirit. That would include the law. The Holy Spirit is not. So if you're following what the Holy Spirit's going to do, you're never going to come under the condemnation of the law for breaking its commandments. And that's exactly what it's referring to. Well, what do they mean? They say, well, we don't want to have to keep these commandments. And, which one? Don't murder? I mean, which? But first of all, why don't you want to keep them? Why do they believe they're gaining? Because notice, the law, these commandments, statutes, and judgments, the commandments will make you wise and understanding. In all the other nations, everyone else will know you're wise and understanding. So why are people like, don't put me under so they'll make me wise and understanding? I mean, it's utterly foolish when you think about it. So why would you not want to do? And we'll also notice, so righteous is all this law. These statutes and judgments are righteous, as Paul said in Romans chapter 7, as I mentioned a minute ago. Why would you not want? Why would you not want to obey commandments that tell you what's right in God's eyes? So when you do these, you're doing what's right in His eyes. Now, what people, the problem people have is, I'm writing a blog post about this about the Judaizers. I'll go into more detail, a lot of great detail with a lot of scripture there. But what they really are thinking is people tell them you have to keep the commandments of culture, those lesser commandments, and the kingdom. And Jesus said, absolutely not in Matthew 5:19. He says, if you keep those teachings, others are going to be great in the kingdom. And I showed my series about the tribulation kingdom, what he means by that. And if you don't keep them and don't break them, the least commandments, you're going to be the least in the kingdom. You're still in the kingdom. But why not move up in the kingdom? Why not take on? Why not take on these things? You'll be able to do it because the Spirit of God will give you the help to do it. It'll make you more wise and greater understanding. It won't make you more righteous, though. Well, you're righteous. It make you righteous in this in the way you're doing what you agreed to do, in that sense. But the people are not more righteous because they don't eat they eat bacon or they don't eat bacon. Okay, but you're not. But it'll make you wiser because there's health benefits to not eating things God literally calls filth. Tamei, the Hebrew word, literally means filth. Akathartos, the Greek word tamei translated into means uncleanable from pollution. I mean, if God says something's uncleanable from pollution, what's wise about eating it? But you can. You're still be part of his kingdom. It's just not wise. Now, continue on here in Psalms 106 and verse 28 through 31. They joined themselves unto Baalpeor and ate the sacrifice of the dead. Thus they provoked him to anger with their inventions, and the plague brake in upon them. Then stood Phinehas and executed judgment, and so the plague was stayed. And that was counted to him for righteousness unto all generations forevermore. So, notice ate the sacrifice of the dead, associated with people who worship their ancestors, necromancy, talking to the dead, which the Bible speaks very much against. So remember, those who the sacrifices made to idols are made to demons, devils, as they'll say in the King James. And now they've joined themselves with that. They provoke God to anger with their inventions, their schemes that thought that they had to get away with this, as if God Almighty couldn't see them, or perhaps they just counted like the guy we just read about, just count on the fact nobody was going to stop him because of his high social position. But Phinehas went against the ways of the world and with the ways of God. And notice, and I want you to bring this phrase to you, and it saved everyone. He executed judgment, the judgment of God, which is to kill them and cut their heads off, hang them up. Notice, it was counted for him for righteousness. Now, this phrase was counted for him for righteousness. Where else have we seen that? Abraham. Abraham believed God, and it was counted for him for righteousness. Well, Phinehas, there's nothing about his faith here. There's his actions. His works were counted. His works that were counted for him as righteousness. Because faith without works is dead. It's not a contradiction. Abraham believing God wasn't a casual believing. Abraham was convinced enough to offer Isaac up as sacrifice in the Akedah. Okay, he was convinced. His faith produced works, which James brings out. Okay, he wasn't saved by just faith alone, but by work, but faith and works work together. Because faith is confidence that leads to action. If you don't have any action, then you didn't ever have the confidence to begin with. You never had faith. Phinehas' faith isn't mentioned here, but his actions, his works are what that was counted to him for righteousness. So let no one deceive you by saying faith alone. Faith without works is dead. It's not real faith at all. That's why James says, show me your works without your faith without your works, and I'll show you my faith by my works. Now, in Hosea 9:10, towards the end of the time of the kingdoms of Israel, the kingdom split. Hosea has to say, as this to say, the Lord says this to Hosea, reminding Israel of this landmark event. I found Israel like grapes in the wilderness. I saw your fires in the first ripe of the fig tree in their first time. But they went to Baalpeor and separated themselves unto that shame, and their abominations were as according as they loved. Okay, so he's saying, first of all, he's starting with Israel, like grapes in the wilderness. What's talking about like out here in North America? Well, when Leif Erikson came, he called it Vinland because there were grapes everywhere, Concord grapes growing wild. And Cyril didn't believe the story really until the time of the Pilgrims came, and England and New England particularly, there were Concord grapes growing wild everywhere. They weren't cultivated. There was no vineyards. They were just growing out in the wilderness. And the hills literally ran red with wine or grape juice, just as the Bible speaks about Israel, okay? Literally, we're doing this. Well, if you're hungry, and you're hungry, and thirsty, finding grapes in the wilderness is refreshing. So they eat, and they're juicy enough that they got enough liquid in them. You don't have to have anything else to drink. So he's saying, I found this. I found Israel was like that, refreshing, in that Jacob, that there still had people among them who wanted to worship the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. People who among them, that would be obedient like Moses. And this is what he says about their fathers. And this is talking about Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob in particular in this context. Like the first ripe and the fig tree their first time. So what's he saying? He's comparing his fig tree at their first time, that's her, like a virgin. First ripe, okay? Like a man who's married a virgin going into her for the first time, and perhaps he's never been with a woman either. That's how God saw her. Saw Israel, saw their fathers. Again, refreshing from all the people around them who were only bent on evil all the time. And that nation, that he wanted to have that same characteristic of the fathers. But why did they, and in particular, some of this new generation that up to Baalpeor had not done any at that 1,000, had zero misses. This basketball, they made every shot they took. They always hit the bullseye. You get the idea. You know, they, I mean, that's what they were like. But so he has this. It's like a man finds this woman, this virgin woman. He delights in her, and then she commits adultery on him. Because that's what they did at Baalpeor. They were committing fornication or adultery, literally and figuratively and literally. They separate themselves into that shame of adultery. And remember previously, God, he had said, naked to their shame before their enemies, naked before their enemies to their shame. You know, they take off all the, if they're wearing any armor or anything like that, anything to defend themselves with, they'd lay all that down to commit this adultery. And they love doing these abominations. These women came to him, ready, willing, and able to do pretty much anything they wanted to do with those women. Any and everything. And their flesh said yes, and they went for it. And it brought destruction to them. And Hosea is telling Israel in his day that you have become just like them, those who turned away from God at Baalpeor. Do not be deceived. You cannot do these things. Fornication, idolatry, except and inherit the kingdom of God. It tells in 1 Corinthians 9:6-9. And that is what Hosea is telling. They're telling the people, the Jewish people in his day, with in this Baalpeor incident, is that landmark incident to show that turn from God, it brings you death. You got to walk in his statutes and commandments. Now we're going to go to Numbers 20. We're going to continue on here, Numbers 26, 1-4, and see what else transpired. Because God's just given Moses instructions to vex them, to get revenge. It means get revenge. Get revenge on Midian for trying to destroy the people of Israel. And here's what, but there's kind of a little, well, first of all, let's see, there's some preparation. And here's how it begins. And it came to pass of that plague, the Lord spoke to Moses and the Eleazar, the son of Aaron, this priest, saying, take the sum of the children of Israel from 20 years old and upward, throughout their father's house, all that are able to go to war in Israel. And Moses and Eleazar the priest spake with him in the plains of Moab, by Jordan, near Jericho, saying, take the sum of the people from 20 years old and upward, the Lord, as the Lord commanded Moses and the children of Israel. And they went forth out of the land of which went forth out of the land of Egypt. Okay, as he commanded the ones that went out of the fourth land of Egypt. He's telling them, take another census. Take a new census, just like the one you did 38 years ago. And it's the same census, 20 years old and upward, for the same purpose. Those are able to go to war. Okay. And notice they're in a similar location. They're in Kadesh Barnea before, not far from the promised land, down towards the southern end of the promised land a little bit more. But now, a little north up there, plains of Moab, which were the Amorites had conquered, which they have now conquered. Near Jericho. Right, Jericho is right across the Jordan River. It's the lowest. The Dead Sea is the lowest point on earth. Jericho's almost at the same, just a little bit higher elevation than the Dead Sea. It's the lowest built city on earth, and that's where they're at across on the east side of the Jordan River. From there, not far, getting ready to go into the rest of the Promised Land. They've already conquered the eastern Promised Land, which the Amorites had owned. As we talked about before, we'll talk about the eastern Promised Land a little bit more, but but the western promised land is still unconquered, and they're right across from it. Now, we're not going to go through all the numbering this time. I thought about doing it and comparing it to the other one because there's some interesting things. Some tribes gain significant have significant gains, some have significant loss. Proportions change, but well, a summary will suffice us for where we're at today because we're focused on this revenge on the Amazon on the Moabites. I'm sorry, on Midian. These are the numbered. These were numbered the children of Israel: 600,000, 8,730. And the Lord spoke unto Moses, saying, "Use these. Unto these, the land shall be divided for inheritance among the number according to the number of the names. To many you shall give the more inheritance; to the few you shall give the less inheritance. To everyone everyone shall inherit shall to everyone shall his inheritance be given according to those that were numbered of him. Notwithstanding, the land shall be divided by lot. According to the names of the tribes of their fathers shall they inherit. According to the lot shall the possession thereof be divided between many and few." Okay, so first thing I want to draw your attention to is the number. 600,000, 601,730. And if you remember when the census that was after the 24,000 were destroyed and the worship of Baal, right before they sent the scouts into the western promised land last time, the number was 3,550. So they have a net loss here, actually. They have a net loss here of about 1,800 people. Well, I guess 1,820 people. But they have a net loss here of they've actually, because of all the plagues in the wilderness and destruction, they actually went down a little bit in population when they would have went up if they'd been obedient to God. And what's the purpose of the numbering is the size. So the land, the idea is everyone's going to get the same size of piece of property in the Western Promised Land. Okay, they're all get the same size of a piece of property, the same size. Now the tribes, people in the tribe are going to stay together. So if, say one tribe has 10,000, one has 20. One has 20 is going to get twice as big a chunk, twice as big a property piece as the size that has as one has 10. And notice it's going to be divided by lot. And how that division worked is, you may have seen a map, you may have seen something on perhaps on a reenactment or something where Joshua's dividing the land. And he has it all drawn out, and he's throwing lots to the side who gets which piece of land. Well, it couldn't work that way because you don't know the lot size, you don't know the land size until you decide who's living there. And so what they did, we were as we showed, we talked about the inheritance of the Levites. Some of the tribes have a fixed position because of promises God had made to some member of the tribe, like Caleb from Joshua, tribe of Joshua, the tribe Joseph with his bones, and so he has to get Shechem, so on and so forth. So they kind of some of them had a little fixed position already, but but 9 of them didn't. So what they had to do was, with those 9, is they had to throw the lot. Let me start over. They systematically went, say, from the east, the Jordan River westward, and they said, okay, the people bordering just south of, let's just say just north of Judah, or we'll say that next to Judah. Who's going to be next to Judah? They throw the lot, and they pick the lot. More accurately, they probably had a bag with perhaps animal bones with the names of each tribe carved in, and they just pick a bone out. That's what the lot is in this case. And they come up with Benjamin, and it says Benjamin on it. Okay, Benjamin gets that chunk. He's not very big. He gets a little piece. and then sort of build out that way towards the Mediterranean Sea from the south up to the north. In the last lot pit, there's only two lots at the end. Whoever's left is going to get that northwest corner up there. Okay, or something of that, an arrangement like that's how that occurred. So this is why. But at the end of the day, inside each tribe, you're gonna have a similar process. Okay, we're gonna start. They're gonna start in one corner because all the clans are gonna stay together. We're gonna keep everyone by their fathers, by their fathers. All the sons of Judah from one of his sons are gonna stay together, and inside that group, so on and so forth. So they're going to go through a similar process inside of each land and inside of each one, down till they get down to the individuals. So that's what is going on, and God's deciding the matter because the proverb says that God decides, determines the outcome of lot picking or casting. Decision is the Lord's. So we continue on here in Numbers 26, verse 57 through 6, 26, verse 57 through 62, and read the following. These are they that were numbered of the Levites after their families. Of Gershon, of the Gershonites, and of Kohath, the family of the Kohathites, and the Merari, the family of the Merarites. And these are the families of the Levites, the family of the Libnites, the family of the Hebronites, the family of the Mahalites, the family of the Mushites, the family of the Korahites. And Korah begot Amram. And the name of Amram's wife was Jechaved, the daughter of Levi, whom her mother bare to Levi in Egypt. And she bare unto Amram Aaron and Moses and Miriam, their sister. And then to Aaron was born Nadab and Abihu, Eleazar, and Ithamar. And Nadab and Abihu died when they offered strange fire for the Lord. And those who were numbered of them were 23,000, all males from a month old and upward. For they were not numbered among the children of Israel because there was no inheritance given them among the children of Israel. Okay. Now notice the number, same as before, when they were when they're a month old and upward for males, which of course have all been circumcised on the 8th day. Okay. And there's a net gain here. There, if I remember correctly, there's 22,200. If I remember, or maybe 22,000 even, but I think it was 22,200. Anyways, if I remember correctly, there's a net gain here for them. Now, there's no inheritance of land. They're only going to get cities, okay? And so they don't have to worry about dividing the land in in equal sized chunks and having a land of Levi, so on and so forth. So they're not so for that reason they're not being counted in that other census, because that census's purpose is for dividing the land up. They're having a census again of a different group, a different age group, for a different purpose. Okay, now as we continue, we continue on Numbers 26, 63, 65. We see the following. These are they that are numbered by Moses and Eleazar the priest, who number the children of Israel in the plains of Moab by Jordan near Jericho. But among these there was not a man of them whom Moses and Aaron the priest numbered, when they numbered the children of Israel in the wilderness of Sinai. And the Lord said unto him, they shall surely die in the wilderness. There was not a man left of them, save Caleb, the son of Jephunneh, and Joshua, the son of Nun. Okay, so they're done numbering them. And what I want you to notice is, of all those they numbered the second time, only 2 of them were part of that first group. Now, we read that generation that came, that new generation, the man was lacking among them, except for the 24,000 who died in the Baalpeor. But this other generation who had 24,000 die, who had 24,000 die from the golden calf incident, none of them were left. They all died in the wilderness, as we showed. The itinerary shows where they were scattered for 38 years. Only thing we know about those 38 years, for a few stories, is where their graves were located. Joshua and Caleb are the only ones that made it out, and they're part of both groups. And why? They're the only two that were faithful. They're the only two that believed God and said, let's go do what he said to do. The only two who wouldn't participate in the whining, the complaining. You know, their generation may have thought they were counterculture, but they were counterculture. They were against the culture of their generation. So they did not do what everyone else did. So they got what no one else got. The blessing of going to the promised land. And it's that way with us, by the way. If we do what the world does, we're going to get what the world gets. Death, destruction, the lake of judgment, the lake of hell, the lake of fire, the whole kit and caboodle. If we want to get what God offers, what God will give, we got to do what the people of God do. Keep the commandments of God. And we'll get eternal life, kingdom, priests and kings and priests, positions of authority under him, in an eternal kingdom that never ends and never stops expanding. But it's determined by our actions and our attitude that drives those actions. We must be like, I encourage you, be like Joshua and Caleb, not like the whiners. God is not sympathetic to your whining. It irritates him. Okay, now let's continue on in Numbers 25, Numbers 27, verse 1 through 5. Then came the daughters of Zelophehad, the son of Hefer, the son of Gilead, the son of Machir, the son of Manasseh, of the families of Manasseh, the son of Joseph. These are the names of his daughters: Mala, Noah, Hagla, Milcah, Tirzah. And they stood before Moses, before Aaron the priest, for the princes and all the congregation, by the door of the tabernacle of the congregation, saying, our father died in the wilderness. He was not in the company that gathered themselves against, and he was not in the company that gathered themselves against the Lord in the company of Korah. But he died in his own sin and had no sons. Why should the name of our father be done away from among his family? Because he has no sons. Give us, therefore, a possession among the brethren of our father. So what do we see here? Zelophehad, and notice, you'll see this, Machir, and they'll talk about the land of Machir, Gilead, this land of Gilead. Notice it's inside the possession of Manasseh, okay? And Hefer, okay? So this Zelophehad is there, in this, and they're saying, see, this is how these names are continuing on. If I was the son of Zelophehad, I have a place in the land of Hefer, in the land of Gilead, in the land of Machir, in the tribe of Manasseh, in the land of Manasseh, in the land of Israel. And and that just goes on. Well, the fact is he didn't have a son. So his name's not going to survive that way. So what they're saying is, give us his property, his inheritance, even though they cannot there. But the problem is they're not men. They can't go to war. And that property is being divided according to that census. that numbers those names that are on that census of the men 20 years old and upward to go to war, not the Levites, but the rest of them. And so kind of a conflict here. If you know they're looking out, they're trying to protect the name of their father, keep it from falling out, not being remembered no more. But he doesn't have any sons, so his name's not going to be on that row. So they're saying give it to us instead, so we can put it on there. But their name's not on that roll either, because it's only the men going to war. So Moses is going to ask the Lord what to do about this problem, because it may not be the only time this ever occurs. And here's what I mean: it's not the only time something's going to happen that a man has only daughters. Well, here's what we read here in Numbers 27 verses 5 through 11. And the daughters of Zelophehad speak right. Shall surely give possession of an inheritance among their father's brethren, and he shall cause an inheritance of their father to pass to them. They shall speak to the children of Israel, saying, and you shall speak to the children of Israel, saying, if a man die and has no son, then you shall cause his inheritance to pass to his daughter. And if he has no daughter, then you shall give his inheritance to him. And if he has no brethren, you shall give his inheritance to his father's brethren. And if his father have no brethren, then you shall give his inheritance to his kinsman as next to him of his family. He shall possess it. And it shall be unto the children of Israel a statute of judgment, as the Lord commanded Moses. Okay, so the Lord knows this ain't going to be the only time this is going to occur. So he's saying they speak right. Basically, put their names on that row under their father's name. Okay, among their father's brethren, meaning, okay, notice his brother, meaning his brothers. Okay, so they're gonna put each of their names under there. So so his name will be restored. So it'll be like one of them was Hogla, the land, the land of Hogla, the land of Hogla, and the land of Zelophehad, in the land of, in the land of, I'm missing someone, in the land of Hefer, in the land of Gilead, in the land of Maker, in the land of Manasseh, in the land of Israel. Okay, so that's what he's going to do. And by the way, this method here we talked about, as I said, this is what Messiah is going to do in all nations as he rolls his kingdom out and they come in subjection to him. There's going to be no more people without land, no more landless people. You're only going to be homeless if you don't bother to build yourself a house. If you don't bother to build yourself a dwelling. So, and this part will also occur as well. If it should occur, if it should come to that, and someone should die, and remember, he died for his own sin. He wasn't part of Korah's group, but he was part of that group that rebelled against the Lord, listened to the 10 spies, and died. For a sin of rejecting, of not believing God when he said, "Go and take the land." Okay. Now, after the census is taken, now the Lord's given Moses some more instructions, but they're really but he's preparing Moses ahead of time. They're not for quite yet. You'll see what I mean here as we continue on Numbers 27, verse 12 through 17. The Lord said to Moses, "Get you up into Mount Abiram and see the land which I've given the children of Israel. When you've seen it, shall be gathered to your people." Oh, I missed an important point back here. I'm very sorry. Okay, well, it's not just about the daughters. Notice there's no daughter, then you're gonna give it to one of his brothers. And it's his brother's job, as we've seen before, to raise up seed to him. So his name won't be, the point is his name's not be forgotten. His first son will be counted as if he was this guy's son. He'd have to marry the guy's wife. He died without children, and try to raise up seed and take and the inheritance would and still so it'd have his brother's name on it, and his son would the first son born of that marriage be counted as his brother's son, and the rest be counted as his. But if he doesn't have, if he doesn't, so you give it to so I'm sorry, you give it to one of his brothers, like I just said. Okay. Now, if his brothers don't, if he didn't have any brothers or left alive, whatever, you give it to one of his to hit one of his brothers. That's to say, like his uncles, or if he has no brethren. All right, you give it to his father's brothers. I'm sorry, his father's brothers. That'd be his uncles. Okay, and if his father he has no uncles, okay, he doesn't have any brothers, so if there's no uncles, then you give it to whoever's closest. And the whole point is to keep his name in there. And that same process I talked about, the firstborn child, that land to be called with his name, and that firstborn child's name is going to inherit that land. And when he's getting off his genealogy, he'll give off, in this case, Zepholahad's name, say, not the name of his biological father, because whoever's biological father has raised up a seed for Zahal in Zepholahad's place to preserve the name of Zepholahad or whoever. Now let me go back to our thing here. These instructions. And the Lord spoke to Moses, get you up into this Mount Abiram, and see the land which I've given the children of Israel. And when you have seen it, you should be gathered to your people, and as your brother Aaron was gathered. For you have rebelled against my commandment in the desert of Zin, in the strife of the congregation, to the sanctifying of the water before their eyes, that the water is the water of Meribah in Kadesh in the wilderness of Zin. As Moses spoke to the Lord, saying, let the Lord, the God of all the God of the spirits of all flesh, set a man over the congregation of Israel, which may go out before them, and which may go in before them, which may lead them out, which may bring them in. The congregation of the Lord be not sheep which have no shepherd. Okay. Now the previous mountain Peor meant split. Oh, cleft. Okay. Has some sort of big split down it. All right. That's where Balaam had went up to. And that's where the Peor being that area around that mountain. But now we're going to another set of mountains, and we'll see it's mountains in a minute here, called Abiram. Which is a range, really, a range of them. And he's going to go up there. He's going to go up into this range, into a particular mountain. The Lord will show him later to view the promised land, and then he's going to die. And why he can't go into the promised land is because he rebelled against his commandment. What was the commandment? To speak to the rock, and he struck it instead. I mean, people, God is serious about you keeping his commandments. He can't, he's not killing Moses over it, but he can't let it go unpunished. Whom he loves, he chastises. And he's chastising not just for Moses' sake, but for the sake of everyone, for our sake. Things happen to them. The Bible says we're examples for us. Okay. If God tells you to do something one way and you do something different, there's going to be consequences. The Lord chastises who he loves. He's not going to let you get away with it. He's not going to let you have the attitude of it. I'm sorry. I gotta go back further. He's not gonna let you have the attitude of this guy back here, of Zimri. Okay. That attitude that, hey, I'm privileged and can get away with whatever I want to. He's not gonna let you get, he's not gonna let that signal be sent to other people. The Lord means what he says what he means. And if you don't do what he says the way he said to do it, there's going to be consequences. He is no respecter of persons. he does not regard anyone. He regards no man, it says in the Torah. And the prophets, it says he's not a respecter of persons. That's what Peter said after the Holy Spirit came upon Cornelius. Now I perceive God's no respecter of persons. It had been said twice in the law and the prophets, but somehow Peter missed that part. Eyes blinded by the teachings of the rabbis. Well, it's the same for you. And maybe you grew up and maybe you were your parents' favorite and you got away with stuff or someone's favorite at the office or whatever. God doesn't have any. You need to do what he tells you, when he tells you, how he tells you to do it. Or you're gonna or he's gonna chastise you in some manner. In Moses' case, not getting to go into the promised land. Now notice Moses doesn't argue with him about it, but he does bring up a problem. Like, okay, if I'm getting ready to leave this earth, we gotta do some things, get the house in order first. And that is and so notice he calls him the God of the spirits of all flesh. So what's that mean? Well, all people, when the spirit is good, the spirit is gone, the body is dead. All people are a spirit living in a body. All the spirits of all flesh. There's only one God, is what he's saying. As Shaul, the Apostle Paul, says in Romans, concludes, he's also the God of the Gentiles. He's always been the God of the Gentiles. They made themselves gods that were no gods at all. But he's the only God there is. And Moses is recognizing he's the God of the Gentiles as well, not just the people of Israel, the congregation of Israel. And he says this man, Moses has been that man over the congregation. Remember, he's been the head of the civil government the whole time. Well, if he's gone, they got to have someone else. And he doesn't want chaos pursuing about who that is. Someone's got to go in before them, go out before them, and when they go out to go take the land, go in before them to lead them into the promised land, lead them out and bring them back in. Okay. And to lead them back out from the battle, back in the home, the congregation. And the sheep that have not a shepherd, be a sheep that have not a shepherd, which is Messiah said about himself, quoting the prophets, and that expression is used over and over again. And this is the first time he's saying, Lord, before I go, we got to appoint, someone's got to be appointed first to take my place, or there's going to be chaos ensuing. That's why, like here in the United States, we have a vice president. Now, he does other things for the president. And one of the important functions he has, if there's a tie in the Senate, he comes in and casts the tie-breaking vote. That's very important. But his main, his most important function is, if the president should die in office, and if I remember correctly, 8 times that's happened in U.S. history, he immediately he's sworn in and becomes president immediately. So there's no discontinuity, no confusion about who's in charge now the president has died. So that's what Moses is saying here. We got to make sure everyone knows who is going to take my place, who's going to be doing this after I'm gone, so there's no confusion. They don't break into factions. And notice, sheep that don't have a shepherd are scattered all over the place. And they don't just scatter all over the place, because breaking the factions and move away from each other, except. So they stay together the way, as a nation, the way you call them to. Well, here's the Lord's response to them in Numbers 27, verses 18 through 23. And the Lord said unto Moses, take you Joshua, the son of Nun, a man in whom is the Spirit, and lay your hand upon him. Set him before Eleazar the priest, for all the congregation, to give him a charge in their sight. And you shall put some of your honor upon him, that all the congregation of Israel may be obedient. He shall stand before Eleazar the priest, who shall ask counsel for him after the judgment of the Urim before the Lord. At his word they shall go out, at his word they shall come in, both he and all the children of Israel with him, even all the congregation. And Moses did as the Lord commanded him. He took Joshua and set him before Eleazar the priest, before all the congregation. He laid his hands upon him and gave him a charge as the Lord commanded by the hand of Moses. Okay, the Lord already had someone picked out and tells him, okay, so to avoid this confusion, let's go ahead and appoint your next guy. We're going to make it official. Now, there's some outstanding features of this. I'm going to draw out to your attention. First of all, about the man he picks. Joshua, the son of Nun, one of the two faithful spies. But Joshua has been there from the beginning. When Amalek attacked them in the wilderness, when they were weak and attacked the hind part and attacked the women, children, and the women, the children, the elderly, like Hamas basically did when it left invaded Israel from Gaza on October 7th in 2023. Joshua is the one that led the fight against them, and they finally prevailed. This is where Aaron and Hur had to help Moses hold up his hands, because as long as the stick was up, they were winning, but when it went down, they were losing. Because so Joshua was there from the beginning. Josh has been faithful the whole time. He's a lifetime, 40 years of showing faithfulness. And a man whom is a spirit, well, that spirit was in Joshua and Caleb, we saw before as well. Along with those 70 elders who all died, by the way, in the wilderness. Because having the spirit, like, well, I'm spirit filled or whatever. Spirit, it doesn't matter if you're not obedient to God. And they were not obedient to God. Those 70 were spirit filled, had the Spirit of God on them, were prophesying. 70 plus 2, actually. 70 went up plus the 2 down the congregation. They were all spirit filled as well, and they died in the wilderness because they did not keep the commandments of God. But Joshua is spirit filled here, and the Spirit of God is in him as well, like it is with a prophet. And who else is spirit on? The anointing is on the priest, the high priest, which is Eleazar. Now, which brings us to our next thing. Notice Joshua is being appointed as the head of the civil authority. Eleazar is the head of the religious authority. And this before all the congregation. The day would be broadcasting on TV or whatever. Okay. Be sure it's on YouTube where everyone can see it or whatever. Make sure everyone knows. And Moses is going to put his hands on him as well. Is going to do this as well. Okay. Is going to have him there. So it's showing the civil authority is transferring civil authority to the next generation. And the approval there is by the religious authority as well. And notice the religious authority is to work hand in hand with Joshua. I haven't talked about it extensively in this series. But I did talk about last year when I was talking about Messiah. Why they're upset with him being teaching in the temple. And it's because that's the job of the judge, along with the primary job of the priest is actually to teach. Think of the chief priest. So that is the same Hebrew word position here that Moses had, and Joshua's now taking over to teach them through, and primarily through, yes, giving them words, but demonstration as well. God holds the leaders to a higher standard. They're to be they're not above the law. They're to exemplify the law. Okay. And so that's so the side and like here in America, and notice that he's going to work with the religious leaders, and that's like our presidents will do that. They'll have some sort of quote unquote, most of them will have a quote preacher, some a Christian preacher consistently. I'm using that term very loosely. That's part of what is referred to as their kitchen cabinet, which is an unofficial cabinet. People that are advisors to them, but don't have official positions appointed by Congress. And there's even but there is a national chaplain in America, so on and so forth. And when the president becomes president, he has to put his hand on the Bible and swear an oath. And that's symbolic of this because in this case, Moses is putting his hands on Joshua. So there was never this ideal. Yes, there's two heads of them, church and state. Church is not above the state, as we see here, but the state work hand in hand, and the religious authority has to give approval for the civil authority. And it was that way for most of European history, by the way. Under the Catholics, the Pope the people had to be crowned by the Pope, and he could refuse to do it, and they weren't king. The country, whoever it was, they go pick someone else to be king. So they had that buy-in from the Pope. Well, those ideals are rooted here in the Bible. The religious authority has to put his stamp of approval on there as well, and that's why Eleazar's there as well, is required to be there. So this two witnesses, Moses and Eleazar, that Joshua is the Lord's choice. Now we're going to go back and look briefly at our itinerary. And they departed from Mobath and pitched in Abajerim in the border of Moab. And they parted from Lim and pitched in Dibon Gad. And they removed from Dibon Gad and camped in Ammon de Balathim. And they removed from Ammon de Balathim and pitched in the mountains of Abarim before Nebo. Okay, notice it says mountains, as I mentioned before. Okay, mountains of Abarim. It's a range. Nebo being a particular mountain or a particular peak, depending on how you want to look at it. Okay. So this is where this here Ayabarim is where we left off before when we looked at their itinerary. So this really been moving around ever since they crossed. This is the place they camped after they crossed over into Moab and wandered and up all the way up to this point where they're now in the plain of Moab that the Amorites had taken from the Moabites, and then they took from the Amorites. Not far from the Jordan is where they're at now. They're pitched in the mountains there, and and Moses to go up to there to see the promised land and die. The Lord has not changed his mind on the chastisement. Now we continue on in Numbers 31. And we're going to skip ahead in Numbers 31, I should say, because we're focused on the acts of Moses, his actions, and Numbers 28 through 29 and 30 are all commandments. We've looked at some when they're relevant to some of the actions in the past, but that's the only time we're looking at. We're focused on the acts of Moses in this series, not the commandments. I've covered most of them in previous series, anyways. So let's continue on. And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "Avenge the children of Israel the Midianites. Afterwards, you shall be gathered to your people." And Moses spoke to the people, saying, "Arm yourselves to war, and let them go against the Midianites, and avenge the Lord of Midian. Of every tribe 1,000, through all the tribes of Israel shall you send to the war. So they were delivered out of the thousands of Israel, 1,000 of every tribe, 12,000 armed for war. And Moses sent to them to war, 1,000 of every tribe. And Phinehas, the son of Eleazar, the priest, to war with the holy instruments and the trumpets to blow in his hand. Oh. Okay, so we 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 see here Moses now is now being back to where he told him to vex him. You're gonna you're gonna die. Moses, we need someone to be in charge. Make sure everyone knows who's in charge after I am. Took care of that, and now we're getting back to now. So now we're getting back to getting rid of, after this act. After this is done, then Moses is gonna not have to. He's got to take care of this first before he dies. Some of this housekeeping what we talked about. So Moses is giving them the instructions of what to do. And notice this here. Notice this is revenge. Getting even with them. That's what avenge means, okay? Avenge who? Actually, notice they're avenging the Lord of Midian. Midian didn't just cause, vex Israel, but it was an attack against the Lord himself. He had made this special group to make his name known throughout all the earth. And they were fighting against that. When you fight against the plans of God, you're fighting against God. Now, notice it's not proportional to the size of these tribes. Everyone's the same, 1,000 out of every one. Well, if one tribe has 10,000 and one has 20,000, one of them is sitting one out of 10 men, and one's sitting one out of every 20 men. So why this 12? Why this? Because the point is equality in this matter. All the tribes have an equal part in it. And also 12 is the number of God. This is really, it's as if God himself's leading this. They're avenging the Lord of Midian. This is the Lord being avenged for the wrong that Midian did to the Lord and trying to get him to destroy the people, the ethnic group, he made to make his name known throughout all the earth, to bring salvation to all ethnic groups. And they tried to destroy that. And this is serious business. So he's showing, and this is why 12 is associated with his government. That's why there's 12 tribes, 12 apostles, so on and so forth. You'll find that over and over again, associated with the government of God. But he sent them to war. And notice who's leading them. Phinehas, the priest, is going there with him, not just Joshua, but Phinehas the priest. And this foreshadows the priest going in front at Jericho. And what's he got with him? He's got the holy instruments. Now, I don't think it means the Urim and Thummim, because only the high priest could have that was supposed to be inside the ephod. But perhaps he's brought a censer with him. I don't know. It's a little just unclear. But what's not unclear of what holy instruments he's bringing with him, they can. Perhaps he brought some tongs from the altar, some tongs. Not going to burn incense, but perhaps tongs for some things like that. Again, represent the tabernacle, representing the presence of God, and these trumpets, the chatzosorah. We talked about these in Numbers 10. The chatzosorah, the silver trumpets. And remember, when he blows them, when they go to war, and blows the alarming sound, it sends confusion. God will send confusion into the camp of the enemy. And we see various incidents of this in other places, where in some cases they the enemy starts killing each other, except, okay? So he's going in front of the army. The unarmored man is leading this because this is the doing of God, not the doing of men. Those kind of guys in other nations, they typically were behind the army, cheering, offering protection from behind, as it were. Where this guy is leading from the front, like a way a real leader does. Now, in Numbers 31, we continue on Numbers 31, verse 7 through 12. And they warred against the Midianites. The Lord commanded Moses. They slew all the males. And they slew the kings of Midian. Beside the rest of them were slain, namely Evi, Rechem, and Zur, and Hur, and Reba, 5 kings of Midian. Baalam, also the son of Peor, they slew with the sword. And the children of Israel took all the women of Midianites captives, and the little ones, and took the spoil of their cattle and their flocks and their goods. They burnt all their cities wherein they dwelled, all their goodly castles, with fire. They took all the spoil, all the prey, both of men and beast. And they brought the captives and the spoil unto Moses and Eleazar the priest, and of the congregation of the children of Israel, unto the camp of the plains of Moab, which are by Jordan, near Jericho. Okay, notice they slew all the males, but you got the little ones. It means all the males of military age in this context. The Midianites, 0 survivors. All of them dead. Again, and perhaps some of them killed each other. The Malach-Adonai went before them as he had when they so quickly conquered the eastern promised land. And they so quickly when they brought judgment upon the Amorites. They took all, and notice they've taken all of it. And notice there's 5 kings listed here of Midian. And there were 5 daughters of Zelophehad named as well. So there's sort of a replacement in a way of them with them, of these kings with those daughters. And we'll see. We'll see in our next lesson a little bit more how that things play out with those daughters as well. And notice most importantly, notice Baalam they slew with the sword. Remember, he was a real prophet of God. God gave him messages. He had trances, fell in the trance with his eyes wide open. He saw into the unseen world when God permitted him. He gave messages for God. The Spirit of God fell on him twice, and he spoke spontaneously, falling into a trance, without him even seeking the Lord, like he did the other 3 times, or the other 2 times. He was a real prophet of God, but he turned from the way of righteousness, as it says in Peter. And the end result was death. He became an enemy of God. If you leave the way of righteousness, you become an enemy of God. And because he's the enemy of God, they slew him. Now, notice he's with these kings of Midian. He had gotten a high position. Well, vice president, as I mentioned. One thing vice presidents do for presidents often is go as spokesmen for the country, and the president will send them on diplomatic missions. Perhaps sometimes in front of him, like say perhaps he'll send to France to talk to their person right below whoever's right below the prime minister of France. Start negotiate. Lay some groundwork for a meeting between, instead of Prime Minister of France and the President of the United States. Well, Balaam is over there with these 5 kings. He's gotten that position he wanted. He's gotten the silver, the gold, all of it. And he lost it all. And that's true of all of us. Everything you accumulate, you have a 100% chance of losing. Everything you get in this world, your position, your title, your wealth, you have a 100% chance of losing all of it. You're going to lose all of it regardless. Why throw away a relationship with God for something of eternal value for something you're going to lose anyways? But that is what Balaam did. And because of that, he got death, physical death here, a picture of us getting eternal death if we turn from the ways of righteousness, because that was the warning of Peter, using him as an example. Now, they take all the little ones. This part is sort of standard operating procedure often in wars, okay? The men become slaves, or they kill them. The women, they take the women off, they haul the women off, and all the children off to make slaves of the children, and the women, their concubines, wherever they decide they want to do with them. They're going to take all their stuff. Now, in this case, sometimes they go and occupy them when they conquer. But in this case, this is judgment, so they're burning them. That's the show. That part's to show this isn't business as usual. They take everything before they set it all on fire, everything and carry with them. Well, that's just not, in war back in the day, kind of business as usual, the spoils of war, except for the part about burning the cities. Usually people burnt the cities, it was so someone else couldn't come back and reuse them against them later. But if they could, they just took possession of the cities and started living in them. Particularly if they were, nice cities, huh? But this was judgment of God. And there's a problem with how they carried out the judgment, and we're going to look at that here. Numbers 31, verses 13 through 18. And Moses and the Eleazar the priest, and all the princes of the congregation, went forth to meet them without the camp. And Moses was wroth with the officers of the host and with the captains over the 1,000, captains over the hundreds, which came from the battle. And Moses said unto them, have you saved all the women alive? Behold, these caused the children of Israel, the counsel of Balaam, to commit trespass against the Lord in the matter of Peor. And there was a plague among the congregation of the Lord. Now therefore kill every male among the little ones, every woman that has known man by lying with him. But all the women who have not known man by lying with him, keep alive unto yourselves. So, they didn't follow some instructions that they should have. And perhaps Moses wasn't explicit enough about it, or perhaps. But notice they saved all the women alive. All the women. Well, those are those are the ones. These are a lot of these are temple harlots and stuff. Maybe that's just them being led by their flesh there. I mean, the people who were in the business of prostitution and harlotry and the like tend to keep themselves in, tend to find out what men like as far as shape of women and whatever, and skin color, and tend to gravitate towards that, to be pleasing to the eye, attract more customers. Well, that's, these women were undoubtedly no different. And they saw that. And they knew they had no inhibitions at all. Okay, so these women offered them great opportunity for sexual pleasure. But that sexual pleasure was what they used to get people to worship idols and be destroyed. That's why God is continually saying, don't marry their wife, don't marry. They will draw your hearts after the Lord. This is, how women operate by and large, ungodly women, I should say, throughout most of the world, most of history. They they use sexual pleasure to gain control of men to get them to do what get them to do what the woman wants. So really, so often it's a kind of it's a way of it's a rebelling against the original instructions about the man created when the woman being created for man and her to submit to her husband. Basically, they're trying to run the show. They're, or as I like to say, what a corporation used to work for, occasionally have to steer the ship from the bows. Okay, because the people have charged them what they were doing, and someone below would have to. Some people below would have to do what the company knew it was good for the company. Despite the I wouldn't say against the wishes, sometimes the ignorance, because the people up top were so clueless, they didn't know what was good for the company. But that was more like Abigail trying to protect Nadab, the wrath of anger. The wrath of David, the anger of David. But these cases, they're going to try to manipulate. They're going to turn their hearts away from God. So they have to be killed, and any of them's going to do this. There's also that, and also as common with harlots and prostitutes, there's that problem of that higher chance of sexually transmitted diseases they may be carrying. Now, the young women who are still virgins haven't learned these things, haven't been putting them into practice, probably haven't don't have any diseases from such things, and they are trainable to walk in the ways of God. But how about every young male among the little ones? That is about preventing the ending the line of their fathers, because their fathers sought to have ended the line of those 24,000 men of Israel who died. Their names were not written down to go into the promised land in that census. They're not going to have their names are lost. Their lines are lost. Assuming they were assuming they weren't older and had children who didn't participate. Okay, but if they were younger, and they're probably younger men for the most part, they're never going to have a child to carry on their name. Their line has been lost through this. So God's evening the scales by having them by having the line of the men who put their women up to trying to get God himself to destroy Israel. Their lines to be lost as well. And they also won't be going back trying to get revenge for their fathers later. But mostly it's about this judgment showing it's severe. And as I said, as I shown, even with the rapture, what happens to little children depends on what happens to the parents. If one of them is doing what Jesus said to be worthy in Luke 21:36, to escape all these things, the whole thing, then their children will. But if none of them are, their children, if both parents say the children are also. And this is the way it's been throughout all of history. Parents are in control of the fate of their children, and these parents did badly and brought an end to their brought a terrible thing to all their children. All their women, all their young daughters that weren't virgins were killed. All the ones that were brought into captivity to Israel. All their sons were destroyed. Now we continue on in Numbers 31, verse 19 through 24. And you shall abide without the camp 7 days. Whosoever has killed any person, whosoever has touched any slain, both purify yourselves and your captives on the third day and on the seventh day. Purify all your raiment, and all is made of skins, and all of goat's hair, and all is made of wood. And Eleazar the priest sent them in the war which went to battle. This is the ordinance of the law which the Lord commanded Moses. Only the silver and the gold and the silver and the brass and the iron, the tin and the lead, everything may abide in the fire, you shall make go through the fire, and it shall be clean. Nonetheless, it shall be purified with the water of separation. And all that abides not by the fire, and the fire shall make go through the water. You shall wash your clothes on the seventh day, and you shall be clean. Afterwards, you shall come into the camp. Okay. So notice them and the captives. The only captives alive at this point are girls who have retained their virginity. Most of them probably, given the way that these people behaved, haven't entered puberty yet, although some perhaps have. And they've all got to be cleansed, and this cleansing process is talking about this involves this water separation. And the water separation required the ashes of red heifers. I'm not going to take time today. I don't have time today to go into all these commandments. I've perhaps looked at them in the past, and probably will in the future if I haven't in the past. But that makes this water separation. And notice they have to be cleansed the third and seventh day. And those commandments if we took time to look, would say if they don't do it both days, then they have to start over. Okay, they're not clean. And they can't come into the camp. They got a camp outside the main camp somewhere. Okay. And notice it's not just them and their captives, their clothes. Anyone that killed someone, why? When touched, it's slain. Why? Because of death is associated with Satan. He has the power of death, we're told, and it's the last enemy that the Messiah is going to destroy is death. Death is an enemy of God. And as you know, here in America, this Halloween is a celebration of death. But Mexico, they call it the Day of the Dead. It's during the daytime instead of at nighttime. Back to the Celts, like the Hebrews, a day began at sunset. This is All Hallows Eve, renamed by the Catholic All Saints Day. But the eve of that night is a celebration of death. And that's why, and death is unclean because it's from Satan. Everything associated with it's unclean. And now they had to kill people in war, so they got unclean doing this. That blood got on stuff. Well, they got to wash that blood out, and then they got this pure this water separation. Even the metal they got to pass it through the fire, get it hot. That'll kill any bacteria except. But now that cleanness is not just about bacteria. They've got to they've got to be it's got to be purified. It's got to be separated from the spirit of from death and death of spirit, as we're told in Revelation. So the third day and the seventh day, then they can come in. Third day, resurrection. And the seventh day, completion. Foreshadows the work of Messiah, this cleansing process. That the millennial reign. All right, now we're going to continue on here in Numbers 31, verses 25 through 30. And the Lord spoke unto Moses, saying, take the sum of the prey that was taken, both of man and beast, you and Eleazar the priest, the chief fathers of the congregation, and divide the prey into two parts. Between them that took war upon them, went out to battle, and between all the congregation. A tribute of a levy attributed to the Lord of the men of war, which out to war, went out to battle. One sow of 500, both of the persons of the beefs and the asses and the sheep, and give it to their half, and give it to Eleazar the priest for a heave offering. Of the children of Israel's half, you should take one person of 50 of persons, beeves, asses, flock, all manners of beasts, give to the Levites to keep the charge of the tabernacle of the Lord. Okay, so among the living things, they're divide the prey equally. Okay, and the prey here consists of animals and these young virgin girls. Okay, and you take the whole sum total and split in two. Now, well, why does the rest of the congregation could get anything? They ain't go to war. Why they get half? Well, they get half because the whole thing's the Lord's doing, and He wants everyone to know it, and that they're going to get some benefit from it. But notice their benefit's nowhere near as much the other benefit. You had 730 men altogether. 12,000 of them went. Kind of give you an idea, plus the Levites. Okay, so you're going to take, no, but not counting the Levites, because that's this priest portion here. So you're going to take, so only 12,000 of them is going to get half. Okay, they're getting way more than everyone else. And notice their levy is 1/10 of what it is of the other people. So it's more like the rest are paying part of the expenses for the men that went to war, like giving a military discount. Except this one's pretty steep. Okay, 90% off. All right. Well, in the military, someone else has to make up the difference, and that's these people. That's the rest of them. And the Levites, the Levites are going to end up with 1 in 5. 1 of 500 out of one half, and 1 out of 50 of the other half. Which works out to be in total 1 of 275. Okay. But there's a lot less of them. Now, there's actually about 20,000. So anyway, so Moses and the Eleazar the priest says the Lord command. Now we're read about them splitting this booty, as it were. Did as the Lord commanded Moses. And the booty being the rest of the prey which the men of war caught was 6,000, 700,000, and 5,000 sheep, and 12 beeves, 1,000 asses, 30 and 2,000 purses in all. Women had not known men by lying with him. Okay, it was a good day to be a virgin among the women of Midian. Now, notice they did what the Lord commanded Moses. It's the Lord's ideal. So notice there's more sheep than men able to go to war. Now they divided equally. Each one would have got about 1, but they didn't divide equally. And there's 72,000 beefs. That's plural for beef, like cattle. Okay, cows would say today, perhaps. However, asses. 61 of those, 32,000. So there's a going down as you go down in number. There's an increase in value, perhaps, of each item, and a decrease in number. Now let's continue on. Let's continue on here. Numbers 31, verse 26, 36 through 41. And the half which of the portion that went to war was in number 300,000 and 35,500 sheep. And the Lord's tribute was 603 score and 15. And the bees were 36,000, which the Lord's tribute was 3 score and 12. And the asses were 30,500, which the Lord's tribute was 3 score and 1. And the persons were 16,000, of which the Lord's tribute was 30 and 2 persons. And Moses gave the tribute, which the Lord's heave offering, unto Eleazar the priest, as the Lord commanded Moses. Okay, so 675 of the sheep go to the Lord's. Go to the Lord. So there's 300,000. There's almost 337,000 left. Okay. So each man went to war is getting about 50 sheep, 51 sheep perhaps. No, I'm not writing that right. Yeah, 12,000, right? Yeah, okay. Each man, each man's going to get 53 sheep. Okay, roughly. Now, out of almost 36,000, each man's going to get around 29 sheep, and some will get 30. And there's be some sort of adjustment here to make this even out. The sheep, perhaps one sheep being worth so many beeves, and so on and so forth. Everything be termed, kind of convert the number of sheep equivalent, then dividing things out like that. But you get the idea, though. They're gonna. I mean, that's almost 30 cows per person. No, I'm sorry, 3 cows and almost 3 asses per person, donkeys. Okay. And about one of these captives per person on the people who went to war. Of course, the most common thing being sheep, each getting about 53 sheep. Now let's look at the other half and see what happens. Of the children of Israel's half, which Moses divided among the men that warred. Now the half that pertained to the congregation was 300,000, 30,000, and 7,500 sheep, 30 and 6,000 beeves, 30,000 and 500 asses, 16,000 persons. Even the children of Israel's half, Moses took one portion of 50, both for the man and beast, gave them to the Levites, kept the charge of the tabernacle of Israel as the Lord commanded Moses. So, first thing you can see is they did count them, and they came out exactly even. Okay, they both had the same number of each of these. Oh yeah, I'm reading the tribute there. That's the same number, and the tributes. Remember, their tribute though is 10 times as much. Okay, 6,000, 6,000. So this works down to this 300,000 sheep. That's basically what their part was about the 36,000 going to the Levites. But is that right? 600. Oh, this 6,000. So they got about 33,000 sheep on their half, and so on and so forth, and so on and so forth. And again, that'd be some sort of conversion where sheep are the lowest valued thing, and everything else is determined in terms of parts of its value relative to sheep. A beef's worth say 3 sheep, and an ass is worth 5, and a person's worth 20, or whatever the case may be. Okay, some sort of evaluation like that, and they divided it inside the congregation evenly on that basis. Not so not everyone got some would get a person, some would instead get 50 sheep or whatever the case. We had a bit about how it worked out based on the other thing. 50 sheep instead, or whatever the case may be. Or perhaps some of the large family get one of these captive people. Some of the smaller family would maybe get a lot more sheep, whatever the case is. So, but this evening out here, as it were, of these portions. So they did what the Lord said with that. And that brings us to our last passage here, an important passage, because there's one more thing that happens that is not commanded by the Lord. We're reading about that here in Numbers 31, verse 49 through 54. And they said to Moses, your servants are taking the sum of the men of war which are under our charge, and there lacks not one man of us. We therefore have brought an oblation for the Lord. Every man has of what he's gotten of jewels and gold and chains and bracelets and rings and earrings and tablets to make an atonement for our souls before the Lord. And Eleazar, the priest, took the gold of them, even all the wrought jewels, and all the gold of the offering they offered to the Lord, of the captains of thousands, the captains of hundreds, 16,000 was 16,750 shekels. For the men of war taking the spoil, every man for himself. And Moses and Aaron took the gold of the captains of thousands and hundreds, and brought to the tabernacle of the congregation and for a memorial before the children of the Lord, for God, before the Lord. So so what so so what do we see here? What we see here is notice who did this. The captain, all the ones who went to war did this voluntarily. Why? Making atonement for our souls. The Lord didn't say, what do they mean by making atonement? Like on the Day of Atonement. Well, that has to be with blood. They mean to pay the Lord for protecting their lives. They do not have that whiny, entitled attitude of the previous generation. They weren't like we're entitled for not one of us to get harmed or not one of us to die in this battle. When they come out every man alive, not one of them lost, perhaps maybe none of them even seriously injured. They have an attitude of gratitude. And notice the Lord had said nothing about giving anything of the gold. He obviously knew it. The jewels of the gold, the chains, the bracelets, and so on and so forth. And unless there's jewels encased in there whose value or amounts not specified for us here. But what is specified is how much gold they got. And remember, a shekel, if you remember, is about two tenths of an ounce, an American ounce, or 11 grams if you're metric. So in American standards, in American standard here, they got this was about 200. This is a little over 200 pounds, of gold. If you're metric, they gave almost 100 kilograms of gold. All right, they had taken, but no one had told him to do this. This was a thank offering, and notice, a memorial of the children of Israel before the Lord. They brought it in there as a memorial to remember what the Lord had done, and to remember they were thankful for it. This is a true thanks offering. The Bible mentions them, and sometimes, but doesn't specify how much to give. And in this case, they weren't even specified to give it. They did out of an attitude, because they had an attitude of gratitude to pay the Lord back for preserving all of us alive. To show we acknowledge it was His doing. He's the one that protected us. And see, the Lord has done good things for all of us. And we need to acknowledge the Lord for the goodness He's shown us. And we need an attitude of gratitude as well. And to give a thanks offering in your congregation, give an offering sometime. I would suggest, just think about all the goodness God's done for you. Perhaps something you maybe brought yourself into disaster, and it didn't go as bad as it should have. Or it looked like there was no hope, and you came out unharmed. Like I've been in 7 car wrecks that were total, and I was never seriously injured in any of them. That was the Lord's doing. I recognize it. I'm thankful for him. And he's done things in your life as well, if you'll think about it and look back. If you're not sure, ask him. And then do something to show him that you're thankful. And at this time of year in America, one thing you could do is you could go and buy. You can help the poor. You can always help the poor, but there's a lot more thrives, effort opportunities at this time, perhaps. And try to make sure the Lord gets credit if you do that. Work through a congregation that honors the Lord, so He gets credit. Because he that lends to the poor gives to God, and God will repay. He that gives to the poor will never lack. But you're not giving to the poor to get, you're giving the poor out of an attitude of gratitude. We're not talking about giving to get here. We're not talking about, nah, give me a faith offering to show your faith and show and write on there what you're believing the Lord for. No, we're talking about give an offering to show thankfulness to the Lord for what He's already done for you. And if he, and you may and if you are one of His, you always have something to be thankful for. Nothing He ever did for me can compare to His unspeakable gift of giving His own Son to die for me. I deserved death. The wages of sin is death. But I deserved him more than most. I deserved him more than others. I'm going to just say that. Because Messiah said that some are worthy of, some are forgiven much, some are forgiven little. I was forgiven much. And I always have to be thankful for. If he never did anything else for me, it would be enough. Dayenu. He gave his only begotten Son, who died a horrible death. I mean, humiliated, bullied, mocked. I mean, everything you can think of, tortured to save me. And my thankfulness will never end. That's all I have till next week. Shalom.